Hello and welcome. You're watching FYI. I'm Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor. Now, on this program, we discuss a lot of matters about health, mental health, issues that should matter to you. What's your gut health looking like? Food is something that we've been looking at for a very long time. So we thought we'll bring you in different episodes, different kinds of food and how to approach food, how to look at it as well. So today, we look at frozen foods. The good, the bad, the ugly of it. There are some upsides, there are some downsides as well. Not all packaged food is really bad for you. So we'll discuss that over this explainer. Let's get started. Let's discuss the upside of frozen food first, and that to start with the very convenient one. It is quite convenient. You open a freezer, you get your favorite food and you cook it and it's done, right? Frozen food can also save a lot of time. A blessing for workaholics. Frozen food has long durability also. It may be saved for months, may prevent the spread of bacteria, not vulnerable to unwanted microorganisms as well. And frozen food, it reduces food wastage, longer durability, aids reduced food wastage, and a lot of fresh food ends up in our garbage, remember, that rather than just being on our plates. It also helps restaurants make their process more efficient, pre-cooked food, shorter waiting time as well. Flexible meal plans, spontaneous food choices, all of that is happening in our lives today because of frozen food. We all knew this by now. We've all been eating it because of that. But did you know the downsides of frozen food? It does not taste as good as fresh food. I'm sure you've noticed that, witnessed it. There is limited variety. There is the cooling chain problem as well. So health issues, power outages and other issues. That means that there might be a time when the food that you're having, especially if it's seafood that is frozen, if there has been shortage in power in the meanwhile, it might go bad, right? Texture may be altered when the food is frozen. Some frozen dishes actually contain preservatives. Preservatives help food last longer, but the regular intake of these preservatives may cause serious health issues as well. Opt for foods that don't really contain too many preservatives, and that's often advised. Some food may lose precious nutrients and vitamins, and that's really the heart of the entire debate on the other side over here. Now, most frozen food contains far fewer vitamins than fresh food. And incorrect freezer temperature may be also a problem, and food may get bad after a rather short period if it is not exactly frozen at the right temperature. Then another downside is something called a freezer burn. I'm not sure if you knew that name, but I'm sure you've experienced it. This is a stage of food where the moisture loss happens. There is an ice crystal that is formed right on top of the top layer, especially with meat, etc., and evaporating from the surface area of the product. Patchy, unpleasant taste, all of that is what comes with as a downside to frozen food. But then we looked at, okay, what is the best way to eat food? And without a doubt, it is eating what is available locally to you, right? Embracing local stuff. Vocal for local actually stands for food as well. The quality is much, much higher for food when it is procured locally. It tastes better, there is better freshness, it has lesser shelf life, but the quality issues are not there at all. There is no added chemicals and aimed at transit as well. It's more nutritious. Ripe fruits, veggies contain the most nutrients, and eating locally means that you'll be eating in season. The natural cycle of the produce is designed to suit your gut health as well, and really can't talk enough about that one. Local food is also great for environment. Lesser food transportation, lesser carbon footprint, and more likely to be organic as well. Local food markets, consumers have questions on direct procurement, purchaser interaction, community standards, unlike the supermarket interaction, which is less purchases as well. So all of that really contributing and telling us that procuring what's in season, what's around you, what's available locally is the best thing. But what do people like us in the national capital do? There is no farming happening around. There is nothing local per se. We get mostly from our neighboring states, and mostly we get everything round the year. I have been faced with this question a lot of times, and I'm sure so have you. So we looked at what exactly is the nutrition quotient of the food that you eat, or it's called the nutrition density. It's important to understand that when you're picking up an item to consume. Now, what is that? Let's just define that for you. Nutrient density is the amount of healthful nutrient in ratio to the calorie content on the food that you're having. The food that has high nutrient density, such as fruits, vegetables, has higher nutrients and fewer calories. The food that has low nutrient density, that is soda, candy, all the stuff that you pick out of a packet or stuff that you're just picking out of a vending machine, all of them have very, very few nutrients but a lot of calorie. But going back to processed food for a minute, a question is that, is all processed food really unhealthy? The answer is no. Not all processed food is unhealthy. Some foods are minimally processed for the purpose of preservation. For example, it may change the nutrient content of the food as well, but not entirely. Fruits and vegetables and meats are frozen to preserve their nutrient content and keep them fresh for longer hours. How they do it is the question. Low-fat milk, clean and milled whole grains, seeds, pressed oils, frozen veggies, all have undergone some kind of processing, yet they are healthy. Milk, flour, juices which are fortified or canned, fruits packed in natural juice or water may not be considered healthy because they have more amount of preservatives in it. However, highly processed foods, also known as ultra processed foods, may harm your health as well. Many nutrients can be lost or removed. For example, peeled fruits, they remove the fiber and antioxidants levels present in them. Absolutely, dehydration may lead to loss of certain water solubles, vitamins and minerals as well. And further, some processed food have a high amount of salt, sugar, fat added to them to increase the shelf life and improve flavor. Not healthy for you. One may not be able to control the addition of these extra additives. However, one can control purchasing such products while going grocery shopping. But it's not always easy to determine what's good and what's not good for you. So on the program, having understood that, I've got for you guests who will help us decode. Joining us is Shweta Khandelwal, back with us on FYI. Very happy to have you, Dr. Shweta. Shri Devi Singh is with us, a doctor, and she's a director at Central Food Technology Research Institute. Very thankful to have you with us, ma'am. And also joining us is Dr. Anupam Sibal. He's a group medical director at Apollo Hospital Groups. All right, Shweta, let me begin with you. Vocal, for local is something that should actually be applied and should come in food. But it is so difficult, and I say this as somebody who lives in NCR, that you go out grocery shopping to pick out stuff and no, just the basic information is not there. Could you give us some cues on how to people who don't have an option to go to a mandi, who don't have an option but have to land up at an air-conditioned mall to even pick up their basic groceries? Some tips for them on how to pick up food?
So thank you for the question, Sonal. The first response to that is that I'm very glad that you have made the connection between foods and climate change, foods and environment, foods and agriculture. Usually food is only seen as calorie, and I'm glad that you broadened the perspective here. So with that, the 2 or 3 things which I think for people like you and me who are unfortunately slaves to this modern day, sort of drudgery of work and managing households. It's important, guys, to remember that frozen food should not be seen as devil. Like they are not the devil here. But the point is, which Sonal made in her opening statements, that food which is fresh cannot be compared to anything. Freezing will not actually make it better, or any other form of preservation here. We are not talking about processing, but preservation. So whether it's canning, whether it's freezing, these things decrease the nutrient content. They are not going to up it. Number one. Number two, they are also going to, you have to remember that these things are to be understood how to do right. Otherwise, you will have a problem, because sometimes commercially done things, have a way, and I'm sure Dr. Sridevi will explain that there is blanching, there is enzyme inactivation, and so on and so forth, which ensures the quality of the product is maintained. But we at home, we pick up a bag of, mutter or peas and just freeze it and we think we are good to go. That is not the best way. There are conditions, like you mentioned, temperature of the freezer and so on and so forth. So for us to choose, even all the supermarkets, Sonal, today have a section on fresh fruits and vegetables. So please try and approach that before going to the frozen section. And also remember, the frozen section market in India particularly, I'm talking here in our supermarkets, is largely flawed, underutilized, and it's full of HFSS foods, the high fat, sugar and salty foods. So my personal opinion is not to catch that bag of French fries by X company, but cut a slice of, take a potato, cut it into 10 slices and fry it to your son or daughter and give it. That's still okay than going for that.
Coding on these packets that one can watch out for? I'm just trying to educate our viewers here.
Absolutely. So there is a nutrition labeling, which is a part which you've done in several shows about. But that nutrient labeling at the back, you must be sure that the added sugar content, for example, salt content, for example, corn starch, or the other kind of preservatives, for example, on this backside of your, packaging is actually a warning sign for you to see. But I tell you, for normal people, if it comes in double digits, be wary of it. It's a very normal way of saying that if your added sugar, your salt is coming in double digits, be a little, it's not the best way.
Yeah, but that will differ from packaging, right? Like people who buy big packets, they will have to look at it differently. And I have always been thinking about this. There needs to be a nutrient ranking perhaps in the country that should come out as a policy. Every food that you pick up should have a ranking on how good, bad, ugly this is for your health, and people should then be taking informed choices. This is not banning everything out there. Everything should be available, but I have always felt that there should perhaps be a ranking of that sort. But I'm going to go back to how people freeze food at home, and I want Dr. Sridevi to sort of weigh in at that point. Dr. Sridevi, for people like us, and this is a personal question, every time, and I'm sure this reflects and will find a chord with everybody who stays away from home. Every time your parents come in, especially your moms come in, they make your favorite food, and before they leave, they freeze a big chunk and they leave it so that even when they are gone, you can get a scoop out and get a taste of home. Is that good, bad, ugly for health? I'm holding my heart and waiting to hear the answer.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. When we talk about frozen food and look at the market, it is a $300 billion market. It is a huge market. The processors in the commercial front do know how to freeze the food. They do know how to transport it also to the market till it reaches the consumer. When you're talking about the domestic freezing of food, unfortunately, not too many people do it the right way. On the right side of freezing food is that we usually pick it up when it is mature enough. So it is having all the nutrients in the optimum levels. And if it is immediately frozen, definitely there will be retention of nutrients.
I see.
What during the freezing is that ice crystals form. And during the thawing process, before cooking, they usually rupture the cell structure. And because of this, there will be drip loss. And that is when a lot of vitamins, especially water-soluble vitamins, could be lost. Ascorbic acid would be lost. But it is nearest to the natural you can expect as compared to any other kind of processing. Now, how do the commercial processing happen is that they do blanching, as was said earlier. During the blanching, the air that is there is removed, and therefore the food will sit properly into the container. One thing. Second is enzymatic activity is reduced. You have certain enzymes which will give browning, which will lead to color changes, which are not at all sensorily acceptable to the consumer. So you to inactivate this, and generally frozen food is actually chopped up into smaller pieces. Therefore, to some extent, there is a destruction of the cell structure and the enzyme can come in contact with the substrate.
I understand that. So, but doc, then what about cooked food that is frozen in freezers?
Yeah, so there you are not really looking at the time temperature relationship nor the container size. So you are randomly going to be freezing larger portions or smaller portions. You are going to be heating it for a longer time, lesser time, which means it is not optimal. So you are doing this processing. One is enzymatic, like I said, the chemical and metabolic reactions that are happening in these living structures of the cell of the food. And second is the microbial spoilage. So you are inactivating the microorganisms to some extent. Now, this does not happen when you are doing it domestically to the optimum level. So your shelf life will be not extended to the possible. And another problem is if there are power outages, it could start spoiling immediately. And if it is not wrapped properly, there could be freezer burns, like you yourself said in the opening statement. So all of this is not really advisable at the domestic level. But suppose you have certain seasonal kind of produce, like maybe green peas, for example, you can shell them and you could freeze those. They would be safer. And please remember that any freezing activity is based on the water activity of the food, what we call, which means that you are actually freezing the water and thereby concentrating the other solutes that are there in the food, which will then not allow the bacteria to grow. So it is.
All right, there is a lot of information to take in and very, very valuable. I think it's a good time to take a pause, get into a break. When we come back, I know Dr. Sibal is also waiting very patiently. We'll go to him as well. You're watching FYI, frozen food. Should you have it? We'll tell you on the other side. Welcome back. We're discussing the good, bad, ugly of frozen food on FYI. And let's go to Dr. Anupam Sibal. Now, Dr. Sibal, these days you get everything in a frozen packet, from momos to murmuras to anything. You can really think about the world be sitting in India, here in the national capital, and eating what people in Thailand or wherever in the world you really want could be getting it. Could you tell us what exactly, why is eating local so important, and how does your gut respond to it?
Good evening. It's a pleasure. The bad and ugly, really appropriately worded. I just wanted to make two high-level points before I sort of specifically answer your question. The first is I want to remind everyone, and I'm a pediatrician, so I want to mark this to the attention of parents, is what Lucretius, the Roman author, had said in the 1st century BC. What is one man's food is another man's poison. And Ludwig Feuerbach in Germany, a German philosopher, had said, we are what we eat. So every time we make these decisions, we should think about these. And I know that, we are very enamored of taste, and we are very enamored of, what is it that someone else is having in another part of the world? Why can't I get access to that? But what we have to realize is that nature has its own way. The reason why we have seasonal foods is because vegetables and fruit grow in a particular season because it's best for them to grow in that particular season. And I know children who want cherries from South Africa, and when they finish, they want cherries from America and Canada. And then, of course, it's time for cherries from India.
Frozen berries is a different
totally
business altogether. Yeah.
Because, you have to realize we talked about the nutritive value. We talked about energy. We talked about calories. We talked about vegetables. We talked about, salts. We talked about all the ingredients that you need to make a particular food group nutritious isn't present at the level that it is when it's taken naturally. I'm not saying that, you should be so dogmatic about not having anything frozen. And Sridevi, you talked about peas, and of course the rajma that your mom leaves is fine. But the question, this obsession that a lot of people have is, I want this because it's exotic and it comes from here and it comes from there. And so when you get into a mall, and even if it's air conditioned, there is always fresh fruit and vegetables available. And that's where you need to head to rather than look at frozen food. Let us also acknowledge the fact that the labeling is not as stringent as we experts would like it to be. And in the absence of that, sometimes you don't always get the right information, and also the level of awareness about what is it that you should check isn't quite there. We see that all the time with food allergy. Parents say, no, but my child's on a gluten-free diet, and you sit with them, and there are 10 things you uncover because of lack of knowledge. So I think there is an opportunity for us, while we educate the public at large, we strengthen our labeling, is to get back that focus on nature, to be one with nature. Nature is what decided what is best for you. Let's adhere to that. Yes, an occasional digression is fine. An occasional craving is fine. But this obsession of trying to get things from outside because they're exotic and they're more expensive, so they must be better, is totally wrong.
Yeah, I am completely out of time and so sad. We must come back to this topic. Actually, this is so interesting. Thank you all. This has been a very, very educational program for me and for our viewers, I'm hoping. And two quick takeaways, really. One, that not all frozen food is bad. We're not here to demean that. Also, I think a lot of people are wanting to eat better and they just don't know how to pick the right products. That's something we need to work on as a country. And third, you are what you eat. So get going there, guys. Bye for now.